Hi everyone, I'm Brock. So as I mentioned, starting trying a new practice. The practice is to make one video per day on different topics. So for Sunday, my current plan is to make a video on a book I read 12 years ago. By start. So today's book I want to discuss about is called the Decameron. The Decameron. Decameron 十日谈 by Giovanni Boccaccio 乔万尼博加修. Okay, so the Decameron is one of the most significant literature works of the European Renaissance, created against the backdrop of the Black Death of 1348, which devastated Florence. Boccaccio used his first-hand experience to depict the horrible plague and constructed a frame narrative around it to present 100 tales. The renowned Italian literary critic, Dialectics, placed the Decameron alongside Dante's Divine Comedy, calling it as a human comedy. While Dante decrypted heaven and hell, Boccaccio painting the full spectrum of earthly human life. Dialectics remarked, Dante ended an era, Boccaccio began another. Okay, here's some timeline. It was first published, the first printed edition in Venice, along the earliest printed books in Europe, which means that people read it, right? And it's written in around 1348 to 1353, which means that it takes more than 100 years for this book to be printed. The Decameron had an enormous impact on the development of Western European realistic literature in the 13th to 17th centuries. Foreign works were directly inspired by it, such as, I didn't read these books, but I heard, I had almost everyone. Well, not everyone, but many of the in the authors. So, who is Giovanni Boccaccio? Giovanni Boccaccio, born in 1313, died in 1375, was born in Florence. The illegitimate son of a wealthy Florentine banker. His mother's identity remains unknown, likely a woman of humble origins. He stands as one of the pioneers of the Italian Renaissance, ranked alongside Dante and Petrarch as one of the three great masters of Italian literature. I don't remember I read anything from Patrick. Maybe not. Boccaccio grew up among merchants and citizens, which laid the foundation for his vivid literature expression of the emerging bourgeois class. At 14, his father took him to Laplace to learn commerce. After six fruitless years, he switched to studying canon law for another 6 years. During these 12 years, he encountered humanists through the broaden his horizon through Laplace court society. After returning to Florence in late 1340, Boccaccio actively participated in Republican politics. The Black Death struck in 1348 when he's 36 years old, 35, killing over half of Florence's population. Shortly after the plague subsided, he began writing the Decameron in Florentine vernacular, co-founded Italian national literature alongside Dante. In 13, he met Patrick, beginning a lifelong friendship. The interesting thing is great people's friends are also great people, right? Well, I shouldn't say that. I should say the history book only remember the great people's, great friends, right? Great people also have a lot of, ordinary people friends, but history book won't write their name down. After completing the Decameron, Boccaccio gradually turned to scholarly research. In 1362, a Catholic monk threatened and denounced him, causing such spiritual desires that he nearly burned the Decameron and all his works. Only Patrick's intervention saved them. You must have a good friends to save you at some point of your life, right? Well, not necessarily save your life, but yeah. In his later years, he studied Greek literature, authored the 15th century volume Genealogia Dom Ranganti. Wow, it's so hard to pronounce. Facilitated the first Latin translation of Homer's epics, and lectured publicly on Dante's Divine Comedy. After Patrick's death in 1974, he spent his final days in poverty and solitude, dying in the winter of 1375. Ironically, the Catholic Church later desecrated his grave. The poet Byron, visiting Italy in 1818, wrote in Fori, even his tomb was desecrated, subject to the insults of raving madmen. Okay. Background. Middle 14th century Europe was at the beginning of the transition from feudalism to capitalism. The Catholic Church, as the largest feudal landlord, and the most tenacious spiritual pillar of the federal system, exercise comprehensive ideological control over Western Europe. Its church, monasteries, religious cults, and inquisitions spread across every corner like a vast spider web. In this era, Boccaccio wielded literature as a weapon, launched a humanist assault against the feudal church. Several cities in northern Italy saw the first sprouts of capitalist production, with Florence as a center of finance and trade, becoming the birthplace of Renaissance. It was precisely during this period when capitalism had only just revealed its dawn that Boccaccio wrote the Decameron, whose resulting triumph heralded the opening of European Renaissance. Okay, so the book structure. The Decameron employs a framework narrative structure: 7 young women and 3 young men. Actually, the first time I read it, I wonder why it's not 5 young women and 5 young men. Why it's 7 to 3? Actually, even today I don't know that. Leads the Black Death in Florence to a valley in the countryside. Over 2 weeks. Skipping Fridays and Saturdays for personal affairs and religious observance. Each person tells 1 story per day, producing 100 tales over 10 days. Each day is presented over by a king or queen who cites the day's theme. Okay, so day 1, free topic: wheat and human vices. Day 2, fortune's tricks and eventual triumph. Day 3, achieving desires through personal wit. Day 4, love stories with tragic endings. Day 5, love stories with happy endings after trials. Day 6, witty remarks that avert danger and embarrassing. Day 7, tricks wives play on husbands. Day 8, trick men and women play on each other. Day 9, free topic. Day 10, noble and generous deeds in love and life. Well, yeah, so for this part, it should also explain in 3 in English. Okay, so background, plot summary. In 1348, a terrifying plague descended upon Florence. Boccaccio, writing from first-hand experience, painting heartbreaking scenes. Victims developed swelling the size of apples or eggs in their groins and armpits, followed by dark blotches across the body. harbingers of death. Healthy people could be affected merely by touching the sick or their belongings. Neighbors avoid one another. Brothers abandon brothers. Wives abandon husbands. Even parents refuse to care for their own children. Each day, masses of corpses piled up on church doors, buried in deep pits, layer upon layer. From March to June, over 100,000 people died within Florence walls. Facing the catastrophe, people's response divided into 4 types: strict ascetic isolation from the world, hedonistic indulgence, a moderate middle path of measured enjoyment while avoiding the sick, and abandonment of home to flee elsewhere. Law and order collapse. Morality disintegrated. In this death-like Florence, 7 young women met in the church of Saint Maria Novella, aged 18 to 27, all from noble families. Anime proposed fleeing to a country villa, and just then, 3 young men with connections to them entered the church, and the 10 departed together. You see, interesting. The Chinese translation doesn't, strictly align with English translation, right? Here it says there either has relatives relationship or romantic relationship, but here in English translation it doesn't mention that. The villa sat atop a hill, surrounded by lush greenery with beautiful courtyards, gardens, fresh springs, and wine. Stark contrast from a desolate city of death to sun-drained Earth's paradise symbolized the liberation from the strict rule of medieval asceticism and the discovery of the beauty of the real world. The 10 elected a daily king or queen to preside and set a day's theme, Sunday or free topic. Each afternoon, they gathered around a fountain or on a lawn, each telling one story. Dear Reno enjoying special privilege. Why? Why he get a special privilege? He always told the last story and could ignore this prescribed thing. Between stories, they enjoy music, dancing, and songs. No stories were told on Fridays and Saturdays, reserved for religious observation and personal grooming. Oh, it seems that back then, they use Saturday rather than Sunday for religious services, huh? Okay, this is a 10-day. Okay, so some key stories. Actually, I remember that, at that age, because a lot of stories kind of like, it's kind of like related to sexual topics. And that topics is always, very attractive for young men in 18 years old, right? Okay, so the first day 1, story 1. A notorious villain named Latin, a lifetime forger, perjurer, instigator, and murderer. On his deathbed, fabricated entirely fictitious confession to a devout crowd, claiming he had never committed the carnal sin, confessed weekly, and his only sin was during what too eagerly after fasting. The fellow believed every word. After that, the church venerated him as a saint, with pilgrims flocking to worship and miracles shown through his hands. This story scantily satisfies the absurdity of church saint worship. What the church needed was not genuine saints, but idols to sustain in its deceptions. Day 1, Story 3. A father on a ring symbolizing patriarchal authority. To avoid favoring any son, he had 2 identical copies made and gave one to each of his 3 sons. No one could distinguish the genuine from the copies, just like the 3 great religions: Christianity, Judaism, Islam. Each claimed to be the true faith. This seemingly simple parable contains Boccaccio's implicit plea for religious tolerance and freedom of thought. If there is no obstacles, there can be no heresy, and ideological control and religious persecution lose their justification. Day 4, Story 1. The story with the highest ideological achievement is the entire connection. Gosmoda, daughter of the Prince of Salerno, secretly loved Guiscardo, a servant of humble birth. When discovered, his father condemned her for loving someone beneath her station. Gismona fearlessly declared her undying love and proclaimed, "We humans are born equal." Huh? This is before. This claim is 400 years before United States is created, huh? Only virtue distinguishes us. The prince ordered Guiscardo killed and sent his heart to his daughter in a golden cup. Gusmodo poured poison over the heart and drank it, dying for love. This story shattered feudal class barriers and proposed a new standard of judging people by character rather than birth. Day 10, Story 10. The final and most controversial story. The Moscow Sazo married a peasant girl, Grisado, to test her virtue. He successfully took away her son and daughter, pretending to have them killed, banished her to her father's home, and announced he will remarry, the bride being actually his own grown daughter. Through all this torment, Great Shadow remained perfectly submissive and obedient. The Marquis finally restored her position. This story praised the Christian style meek submission as virtue, forming a stark contrast with the anti-feudal fighting spirit as book's openings. As critic Fang Ping observed, the Decameron begins with stories opposing the feudal church, yet ends with feudal preaching, a fact worthy of deep reflection. Mm, okay. Yeah, here are some relationships, but I don't care about too much. Okay, theme analysis. The most prominent theme of Decameron is its comprehensive critical of the Catholic Church's asceticism. Asceticism forms the core of Catholic doctrine, demanding people believe that the earthly world is a pit of sin, that life's true meaning lies in hunger and abstinence, and that all earth's pleasures must be delight for happiness in heaven. Boccaccio saw through the essence of this scheme. Behind asceticism lay indulgent. Priests condemned carnal desires in others' hearts, only to scale sinner away from women so that they could enjoy them themselves. Thing two, exposing church corruption and anti-obscurantism. Boccaccio systematically exposed a comprehensive corruption of the Catholic Church from the Pope to parish priests. In Abraham the Jew, a Jewish man witnessed firsthand that in the Roman Curia, from top to bottom, no one was free from shame. His conclusion: Rome is not a holy city. It is a cesspool of filth. Simultaneously, Boccaccio sharply criticized the church's obscurantism, manufacturing saints and miracles to deceive the populace. The Saint Singer revealed that so-called saints are merely tools for the church to maintain deception. Charcoal as holy relic reduced the holy relics and miracles to worthless jokes. Theme 3, love as the supreme expression of human nature. Boccaccio gave love an entirely new evolution, viewing it as the most positive force in human nature. Pure love was seen as the natural expression of the deepest feelings, beyond reproach, horrible and deserving of blessing. In his writing, Love possessed the power to enlighten and transform. The dull seaman was awakened to intelligence by love at first sight. Cupid performed his office of enlightenment. Love was also a weapon against the feudal class hierarchy. Chismonda's declaration, "Only virtue distinguishes people," voiced the protest of the emerging bourgeoisie. Love tragedies like Lysistrata's story condemns how feudal patriarchy crushed the happiness of young men and young women. Sinful, fortune, intelligence, and individual endeavor. The Decameron is threaded with the medieval literature theme of the wheel of fortune, but Boccaccio infused it with new humanist meaning. Individuals can overcome fortune's tricks through their own wit and courage. The overarching theme of Day 3 best captures this spirit. Through personal wit, desires are fulfilled or lost things restored. However, this theme also had its dark side. Some stories praise self-serving cunning and deceit as long as it brought personal benefit. This reflected the dual nature of emerging bourgeoisie's individualism. Theme 5, Women's Dignity and Wisdom. As a humanist writer, Boccaccio shows precious sympathy and respect for women. He declared in the preface of Decameron was written for women, confined for the small ward of their chambers. The book created a series of admirable female characters. Yet, Boccaccio could not fully escape his errors and limitation. Solomon's counsel still propagates the feudal notion that a good wife or bad wife both need a stick. Theme 6, Humor and Love of Life. Another crucial quality of Boccaccio was his irrepressible humor and love of life. These 6 stories were particularly typical. These brief tales had virtually no profound themes, merely life, vignettes, and anecdotes. Two friends mock each other's bad rugged appearance in the rain. Young men battling over a bet. But Boccaccio stepped out of his study, forgot his scholarly identity, and mingled among laughing citizens, recording life's flavor, laughter, humor, and the intimate atmosphere of real life, and the love of living. Okay, so some of my own reading notes. Inside 1, parallel with Chinese Ming Dynasty stories. Inside 2, the Dialectics of Desire.对性的欲望是爱情的基础，对美食的欲望让世界出现了各种美味珍馐。贪婪鼓励人们敢于承担风险，求取成功；懒惰天性让发明创造能够有用武之地。暴露给予了人们勇气， 极度迫使人们进行痛苦的自我改变，从而变得更好。傲慢使人产生骄傲与自尊，不屑做自己不耻的事。Interesting. Insight 3, the philosophy of balance. Too much is as bad as too little. 人类花了几百年时间，终于从禁欲主义的桎梏中挣脱出来，但却又一脚踏入物欲的泥淖，把物质上的感官享乐作为人生最大的乐趣。So what I preferred is that only by having experienced both severe asceticism and immersion in sensual exercise can one achieve deeper insight into desire. Insight 4, the hypocrisy of both contradicting deeds. Yeah, kind of like a family education, right? Parents easily make this mistake, telling children to start hard while spending their own days in idleness. Insight 5, verbal wit and God's eye view. Okay, here's some methodology analysis. Okay, here is, analyze this book from different perspective. Okay, conclusions. Key takeaways. Happiness is on earth, not in heaven. The Decameron's most fundamental declaration is abandon heavenly fantasies, proclaim happiness on earth. In an age when the church painted the world as a paid of sin, Boccaccio helped readers discover how beautiful this colorful real world is, how worthy of celebration. This shift in consciousness or the spiritual starting point of the Renaissance. Insight key takeaway 2. Human nature cannot be extinguished. From the green goose parable to Gismonda's martyrdom, Boccaccio repeated to demonstrate no matter how severe the ascetic rules, they cannot suppress humanity's innate emotions and desires. Takeaway 3. Hypocrisy deserves more criticism than desire. Boccaccio's sharpest satire targeted not desire itself, but the hypocrisy of saying one thing while doing another. Preaching abstains while indulging themselves. This critic remains relevant today. Any moral authority that cannot practice what it preaches lost all perceivable power. Takeaway 4. All humans are equal. Virtue comes first. Takeaway 5. Seek balance between asceticism and indulgence. Takeaway 6. Laughter is proof of vitality. And the desperate shadow of Black Death, 10 youth chose storytelling, singing, and dancing, combating the fall of death with laughter and creativity. Boccaccio's human love of life was himself the most powerful rebuter of asceticism. Only those who love life can produce bright, healthy laughter. Takeaway 7. Literature is a weapon against oppression. Yeah, I agree. Sometimes pen can be mightier than the sword. Agree. Okay, yeah, I think that's pretty much for this book. And yeah, thank you everyone. Bye. This is a very interesting, collection of stories, and on a beautiful, Sunday afternoon, or it's we can get a lot of enjoyment to read it. You know, a thought I have is that sometimes it doesn't have too much if you just tell people stories directly and say, hey, you should do this, you should do that, this is right, that is wrong. No, it doesn't work. You must use stories, vivid stories, to attract people. That's some kind of human nature. Once people like your story, themselves will get some, key takeaways from the story, from the characters in your story, and even, have some internal reflection and change their behaviors accordingly. Okay, that's pretty much about it. Thank you, everyone. Bye.